in this data-driven patch for 2024, we have some big changes to archetypes like Junk, Loki, and Miss Marvel, while having some small meaningful changes to Kingpin and Quake that might allow them to see some play. How you doing? So hello everybody, today we're talking about the patch of 2024, first patch of the year, going over some big changes to some archetypes, while we do also have some smaller changes there. A lot of things to shake up the meta, so should be a pretty interesting one. Let's get started. Hello. Hello and welcome to the first balance patch of 2024 for Marvel Snap. So finally they're back from their break. They're making changes. We'll kind of see. I know this patch kind of got released before. I didn't really go over it or talk about it. Didn't really read it too much just because I wanted to wait for the official release in case things change, but now we have it, so let's go through it. So first thing off is Loki change. I did initially say that I didn't really think Loki was too much of a problem, honestly, right now, but I also wouldn't mind changes to Loki just to tune him down a little bit. So even though, I did say it's probably fine, I'm okay with them changing it as well. Like they should have changed it a long time ago. Personally, if they were going to change it, now like the meta has changed a lot. Though I do think at the highest ends, it's still kind of a problem. But for pretty much most people, you have other options, or most elos, you have other options. So Loki now is going from replacing your hand to transforming your hand. So this really only changes the collector interaction in a meaningful way, where collector's not getting buffed this way. Now you might still play collector because collector generally gets stats from the other cards you're playing, the cards that generate cards to your hand, but Loki itself is not going to be giving you that huge power surge, where collector ended up being like a 211 or something crazy. So it is a meaningful change. I would say collector definitely does a lot for Loki decks. So I do think you'll probably still play collector in decks, but you might have some more room to experiment with other cards. Loki's been a force since release. That's putting it mildly. Loki struck deck, our OTA nerf to 4 or 5 was a small hit, but probably about half as effective as we'd hoped. We had another patch to implement a second change, so we took the time to play with fairly decent changes to monitor the metagame. Yeah, so they weren't really happy with making another OTA change. They wanted a big change, a patch level change. So that's why they've been waiting. As December began, we even saw Loki falter. Blob Thanos shook things up a bit, and Loki was able to squeak back into the mix on top. Once we saw that, we decided to soften our approach rather than pursue a larger rework. So they were going to kill Loki, is what it seems. Then they were like, "Oh wait, Loki's losing sometimes. Let's not kill Loki." Ha ha ha. This adjuster removed the collector's role as a massive source of power. The winningest card overall in the Loki decks has rarely actually been Loki, choosely collector. I don't know if that's true, but sure. I mean, meaning more loser collectors are in the data. This change will be good for the collector long term. It's not good if you don't buff the collector afterwards, because future patches will be able to balance the collector around its strength in other decks without the burden of Loki's presence. All right, I mean, well, I'm okay with this change. It's not really bad, and I do think Loki could still use a nerf, like regardless. Even if I think it's fine, I still think like the essence of playing against Loki is so annoying, so problematic, that you don't want it having such a high meta presence. It's kind of like the lockdown argument, where playing against lockdown is such an annoying task that you don't want every other deck to be playing against Lockdown. Loki is a deck that can become every other deck potentially, so you want to kind of tune that down preemptively. So I kind of see this. We'll see how it changes. I will say, this still works with Quinjet, right? So previously, when a card transformed, it's still kind of starting your deck, right? But now they're changing it where transformations count as not starting. So this is just to kind of help with Loki Quinjet interaction, because normally if you transform a card, Quinjet will not work with it. So they still want Quinjet Loki synergy, which honestly I don't understand. I think Quinjet Loki synergy is already crazy, and the fact that Loki doesn't have minimum 1 is also strange to me. I still think like it would be fine to have it minimum 1 instead of the minimum 0 spam everything if you're playing in specific deck archetypes. So yeah, but yeah, Quinjet still works with Loki. Basically, that's what they're saying here. Now, Miss Marvel. Miss Marvel is an interesting one because a lot of people think she's OP, and she is. And it's interesting to see what their adjustment to Miss Marvel ends up being. So they're changing it where you need 2 cards for it to work. This makes sense to me. This is honestly what I thought Miss Marvel was going to be originally. However, they released her super overtuned, in my opinion, and now they're trying to dial it back. This always happens, right? Like, there's a good card, you get to play it for a while, and then it gets adjusted, I guess. But still, it's still getting the +5 power. So instead of going from 15 power max, it's 14 power max, which is still good. And adjacent locations +2 power, that just changed some deck archetypes. Things like ramp and stuff is going to be harder. It's also going to be a lot easier to know exactly where your opponent's going to be playing in the final turns, right? So I do think this is a meaningful nerf, but we'll have to see how it actually ends up playing out in the grand scheme of things. So it's going from a 4/5 to a 4/4, and you need to play 2 cards. I do think some decks don't care. Some decks already will do this, but there will be some other decks impacted by this for sure. We've learned from players that for many of them, the default assumption was 2 cards were necessary. Yeah, but we also weren't psyched about how well Miss Marvel synergized with Professor X. This change captures better gameplay while shaving off a bit of his strength. Yeah, I don't know how to feel about the first 2 changes. Like, I guess it makes sense, right? They make sense. Yeah, okay, let's move on. Annihilus, I'm not sure we need it, but their explanations, like, this was a really powerful outlier card. I really was not seeing that in the games, but apparently they were seeing that in their data. So I will trust their data over my random experience for sure, right? So even though return playtesters found the meta decks, their performance was surprising. In particular, the strength of just playing Sentry Hood Annihilus, which makes sense. That's a good combo. Like, Sentry Hood Annihilus is like 20 power. Like, it's very strong. During design, we widened Annihilus condition to include 0, in part because we were worried it wouldn't be strong enough. Clearly, that's officially strong. So we're restoring our preferred design that requires cards that have negative power. I'm taking a little base power away from Annihilus. This might seem heavy, but Annihilus has been one of our most significant outliers in card performance for weeks now at every level of play. Like, that is surprising to me. I would not have assumed that. Even more surprisingly, Annihilus was performing better in more competitive samples than anyone else. Yeah, there were some exclusively Annihilus players at the very top end of the meta, and I assume that those players are warping the stats of Annihilus at the top end, which is interesting, right? But I do know there were some specifically Annihilus stands, Annihilus mains at the very high end doing very well, right? So they may have caused this change for Annihilus at the high end. Is very funny. But yeah, definitely a little surprised, but I'm gonna trust their data here. But I didn't think Annihilus was a big issue, but I can also see it being an annoying deck to play. This is another like lockdown level card where, especially with the rocks, I do think like debris into Annihilus is very annoying, right? Like as a consistent combo you could play. I do agree with that. So they were probably looking at that and being like, that's something we don't want in the game. So I can definitely see that. It does make the Annihilus gameplay a little bit more linear. The hazmat interaction requires a ton of effort and probably not really going to see that much play, things like that. So um, we'll have to see. But yeah, definitely a pretty big nerf to Annihilus, and we'll see if things continue. Next up, we have Dracula. This one very much confuses me, right? So it's going from a 4-0 to a 4-1 at the end of the current discarded card to gain its power. So they're essentially saying you can now buff it and it'll be fine. So I mean, I don't think this is a buff personally, in my opinion. I'm more looking at this as a slight nerf or like equal, just because I liked how you could play this into locations that didn't really, or the areas that had negative power increases and you'd be fine, right? You could play this into locations where it's like, oh, um, they have a Cyclops there. You didn't care about that. Things like that. It was just very nice to have like, no matter if you try messing with this lane, Dracula's gonna drop down a big beast here. But now you can't really do that easily. It now requires a little bit more effort. So I don't know. I don't love it. I would have rather had this has its power plus blank, right? +2 or +1. I'd rather see that, right? Instead of having it be reactionary to what happens in the game. So, um, I don't know. I'm not sure. Well, we have to play with it, but I don't really feel like this is a buff in the way people were playing Dracula. But at the end of the day, we'll see. And it does open up some new game plans. So I'm kind of looking at it in its old form, kind of like saying, "Ooh, I love the old form," and now there's this new form, and there's some things to like about the new form. It's just that it's not the old form. It's not what I'm used to, but we'll get adjusted, and then we'll have our opinions there. Next up, we have Angel. People have been screaming to make this change forever. And I'm with you. I don't have a problem with this. Yeah, flies out from your hand to deck. Do I think people are going to start playing Angel now? I would say maybe. Maybe some destroy decks will start playing Angel. I don't know, but uh, you know, like it took a while for this one. But yeah, definitely cool to see. They're listening to the community. Copium, right? Flies out of your hand and deck to replace it. Makes sense. I don't know if this is going to really, really change Angel's play rate, but people will definitely test it out and see it, and then stop playing it after a week because it's still bad. You know how it is. Next up, we have Quake. So Quake is going from, if it's in the middle location, swap the positions, to just swapping the positions of the other two locations. So essentially, you're not swapping all three locations anymore. You're just swapping the two based on where you play it. So this could have a meaningful adjustment to how people play it. We expect Quake might become an interesting alternative to Scarlet Witch. I mean, people aren't playing Scarlet Witch that much, to be fair, right? So, we'll have to see. But then again, Scarlet Witch is maybe too random, where Quake might be enough control in the aspect of location changing that it might see some play. So, and I can definitely see the power of Quake in some scenarios. So, this could be a pretty interesting tech card people might start using. So we'll have to see, right? Honestly, I could see myself playing Quake. Like, I could see there's definitely a lot of like power into this. So Definitely an interesting one, but we'll see how it goes. Quake is too strong. Oh my god. All right, next up we have these move adjustments we'll get to. So Kingpin is going from when a card moves here on turn 6 destroyed to when a card moves here afflicted with -2 power. Um so it's now a 2/3, so you can play it earlier, but it's now not a destroy effect. Uh, Now I will say no one was really playing Kingpin seriously. I have tried and things like that to try to find a deck that can work with Kingpin. Like the the closest I came was like it was like turn 6. You play Kingpin Arrow, I think was what it was, and then you could like actually do like trigger to destroy. You needed priority though, and you had to play Sarah on 5 into Kingpin Arrow. It was like a lot of effort. It was like too clunky, but that was the closest you get. Some people will go like Kingpin into Magneto, but a lot of times if you play Kingpin early, they'll just log the lane, so your Magneto doesn't really get to do anything. So it was just like so hard to make it work. Um, but let's talk about the ropes notes. One of the few remaining loose ends that are changes the move mechanic was Kingpin and Fish Tower being able to destroy cards thanks to Juggernaut. It's been a source of confusion, and Kingpin's been weak enough that a rework was worth pursuing. This change makes the interaction with Juggernaut match existing expectations because we don't let unrevealed cards have their power modified. So, still, I mean, that kind of hurts. We've also made the effect asymmetrical and tried out an aggressive set of numbers to see if we can convince players to consider pairing Kingpin with Polaris or Spider-Man. Okay. It also adds a good way to adjust Kingpin via OT and find a good spot. Yeah. This is kind of like it's kind of like what's that one card? Oh, you know what I'm talking about. Craven. It's kind of like Craven in essence, right? You have a secondary Craven. So like Silky Smooth might run Kingpin now on top of Craven, so now you can go Craven and Kingpin, run 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 a ton of that and start seeing if that actually works. So definitely definitely interesting. I do think this will see more play than regular Kingpin saw no play, so this will see more play for sure, and we'll see how good it is. Probably I'm thinking so Silky Smooth, you put it in and see how it works. American Child is having a text only change, so doesn't really matter here. And we have some bug fixes, so there's a kind of handful of non-intuitive interactions. They've been trying to clear that up, I would say, generally. The most prominent one has been Angela, who would receive her power when a card is played or location but revealed at a different one, thanks to something like Juggernaut. So, to solve that, we're implementing a new functionality in the patch that allows us to track where a card began to reveal rather than where it finished. So, it means that Juggernaut will stop unrevealed cards from buffing Angela, but she'll be able to buff by Spider-Man. So, those kind of things. They're cool. It doesn't change too much, but it makes things clearer. So, I'd say that's helpful. Um, so we have the list of cards changing. Nothing really super surprising. I wonder if Negasonic will fix some things like Magneto interactions and stuff like that. I do wonder, but other than that, and then a ton of locations. And then we have Fish Tower also going from destroy to -4. Destroy was definitely made more impactful. I don't know if -4 is enough to really mess with move. I mean, I guess it is, right? But we'll have to see. Though there's not a lot of like move hate in the locations compared to some of the other minion archetypes. Move hate doesn't really, but move doesn't really see that much play. So I guess move hate, if there was more, would be less relevant, right? So kind of interesting there. And then we do have the series drops, right? So Master Mold, Spider-Man, Negasonic, Stature, Stegron, moving to Series 3. So these are pretty much able to get if you're missing any of these. And then we have Howard, Ghost Spider, Kitty Pryde, Silver Samurai Echo, Phoenix Force, Hidden Monkey, Lady Deathstroke, and Dakin, moving down to Series 4. I do wonder when the next one will be. I know we just got this one, but I do wonder, what the cadence will be in 2024. But we do have at least some changes, so that's nice to see. It's kind of weird that in series drops they have like the Series 4, the Series 3, and the Series 5, the Series 4 in the same picture. Seems like she should just have like Master Mode, Spider-Man 2099, Negasonic, Stature, and Stegron here instead of like Dak and Hidmonkey, Kitty Pryde in here generally. But that's just their prerogative. Doesn't really matter. But overall, those are the changes. When it comes to the changes itself, the Loki change makes sense. Like these are changes that make sense, but I don't know if I feel good or something. I'm not excited too much. I'm okay. I am a little excited to play with Quake. That one is interesting. I do wonder how that's gonna be. But other than that, it's generally they seem data driven and reliable, I guess. But we'll see how it ends up working at the end of the day. I don't think this changes too much of the meta. I do think like Thanos Blob has more of a meta presence, but I assume their data doesn't address that right now, so we're probably gonna have to wait for another patch or OTA before we see the adjustments or things like that. So yeah, definitely we'll definitely have to see. But overall, generally makes sense. Miss Marvel was a problem. Loki was sometimes a problem. Annihilus, I didn't really see it, but apparently their stats say it was a big problem, so we'll see. And then the other ones are just like quality of life things. And then Quake is interesting. And Dracula, I am not too sure about, but overall, those are the changes. We'll see how it goes. Take care of yourselves and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Educated Colin Snap. Once you watch him, you won't go back. He'll teach you to marvel snap. Your skills will be